I'm Andrew Dawson. I'm a mix engineer, I'm a producer, and sometimes a songwriter or generic sonic sculptor and creator of audio goodness. I grew up in the western burbs of Minneapolis, Minnesota, Hopkins, Minnetonka, Chaska area, Chanhassen. It was cool. It was like a Midwest kid, liked to play in band, liked to do a lot of musical things. Interestingly enough, is my mom ended up living about 10 minutes away from Paisley Park, which is Prince's studio, in the middle of cornfields when I was a kid in Minnesota. I was drugged to piano lessons from like 5 years old, classical piano lessons. Then I ended up loving it. I loved playing piano. I got more into it at first, like most kids, I don't want to do that. And then I got better at it. I got more into it. I picked up guitar, self-taught when I was like 11, 12, 13. My grandpa had an old Epiphone that I picked up, and my mom had like a nylon string guitar. So, guitar was cool at that point. Piano wasn't as cool. So I started like learning guitar and teaching myself with tab books and stuff like that, and continued piano and kind of picked up anything musical I could find. Yeah, so I tried a lot of different things. I played double bass, tried trumpet. I just did not have the chops for that. I picked up bass. I liked bass guitar a lot. That's cool. I liked holding down the fundamental foundation. I tried playing drums, like had the kit and practiced and did the rudiments and paradiddles with my feet and my hands and the flam taps and all that stuff. And for some reason, I really wanted to be a good drummer, and that one just took longer for me to connect on. So I really appreciate and respect drummers, but for some reason that instrument just did not click with me. All the other ones, great. Anything stringed, anything keyed, no problem. But drums was a little harder for me to pick up. I kind of had exposure at an early age to it. Strangely enough, is one of the kids in my third grade classroom. His dad was an engineer for Prince at Paisley Park. So our third grade class, only class in the whole school, got to tour Paisley Park. Early 90s when Prince was absolutely humongous. I'm seeing an SSL, live room tracking. I'm like 9, 10 years old. I have no idea what's going on. But obviously that kind of affected me somehow, because here I am doing the same thing. Fast forward to high school, I had the option of like leaving school early my senior year, and like, what do? Sit around, twiddle my thumbs all day? So they put me in an internship program where I ended up working at a recording studio downtown Minneapolis, basically being the gopher boy, cleaning dishes, taking out the trash, running CDs to the stores, because it was a small indie label at the time, literally dropping off 5 CDs at a time to Best Buy locations around the city. So it started getting me in that studio culture mindset, and I noticed it more and more. Played in a lot of bands. I did a lot of music stuff, but I didn't like particularly performing. And that was going to be a problem if I was big into music. I'm like, I don't want to perform. So found like Cakewalk, had like a Tascam cassette 4-track recorder, started just like practicing rhythm and lead guitar parts and recording myself, on top of each other, and getting like exposed a little bit more and more to recording technology that way, just because out of necessity, like I wanted to try to figure out how to play these songs with myself or my bandmates. So I ended up being the one recording them all. I interned at the studio in Minneapolis, and after high school, I ended up going to Berklee College of Music for a couple years, 2-3 years. I majored in their MP&E program, music production engineering, and then I was focusing on my piano playing there too, learning music theory, kind of soaking it all in. And it was a good experience for me to go there and move out of Minnesota and kind of go to the East Coast. I wasn't 100% certain that I wanted to do engineering and production, but I knew that was like a heavy influence in what I wanted to do. I loved the creation and the manipulation of sounds and figuring out multi-track recorders or having 16 channels of MIDI on a keyboard to play with, multiple sound banks, and okay, drums are on channel 10 and my bass is on channel 4, and figuring all that stuff. And it was a passion of mine. And at that point, I was like, let's pursue it. And I was lucky enough that my passion was be able to become a career. About 3 years into my Berklee career, I got an interview opportunity at Sony Music Studios in Manhattan and opted to head on down there immediately to start as an assistant engineer in that building. I moved to New York City about 2 weeks after September 11th. So it was a strange time to be moving to New York City, but people were still making records and they still wanted to hire me. So I'm like, let's go, I'm there. It was good and bad. It was a double-edged sword. So I kind of started out as like a probation assistant, I guess. I didn't have to be what's called a GA or general assistant. I actually got to start out in the rooms right away. I had a lot of experience from live sound and my working at Lexicon and some other stuff. So they kind of let me in the room a little bit quicker than most people, which was awesome on several levels because I get a little bit access a little bit quicker. So I was kind of ghosting other assistants, learning the rooms, but it meant a lot more work for me because I had to learn. I'd never seen an SSL 9000, and that's what they were working with. And I had never run Neve automation at that point. So after every session, I was literally staying there with the manuals and books for every synchronizer, every machine, learning everything, literally not sleeping. Everybody would leave and I'd be there 3-4 hours after every session, just practicing everything in the studio. So that was a lot more work. And the other downside is I was skipping the line in front of a bunch of people. And that was tough to navigate from an interpersonal relationship level because they're like, hey, who the is this guy like jumping the line in front of us? So I had to work extra hard to and I needed general assistants to help me too. I couldn't have them leaving me high and dry. So I had to, make sure, smooth it over with them, be cool with them. Hey, promise I'm not a dick coming in here taking your spot. And so it took some time as the outsider to earn the help of the general assistants working around there too. But within about 2 or 3 months, I was just full on assisting at Sony. So that was great. Yeah, I did actually. I worked with, part of the great thing about being at a facility like Sony and coming up through there is the sheer talent that came through that building. It's one of the premier, at the time, it was pretty much Sony and the Hit Factory were the big operations out of New York City. And that's when New York City was booming doing studio stuff. I worked, I got to assist a bunch for Bob Power, who did the Tribe Called Quest records, Tony Maserati, Elliot Shiner, Dexter Simmons, bunch of really, really talented, very seasoned mix engineers. And to just have the opportunity to be their assistant was a big deal. You couldn't be a hack assistant with those guys because they were awesome and they knew what they were doing. And just the fact of being there and picking up and learning all their tricks and just subtle little things and learning all their tools. I get to learn about their process and how everybody approaches stuff differently. And being able to have I like to say I learned more in 3 months of assisting than I did in 3 years of school. Because it was just that there was just so much information to take in. Now, the other side of that story is I think I needed the 3 years of school before I would have been ready to be in that position to be in the 3 months of assisting. So I'm glad I went the route I did. Geez, there's so many. I think I remember there were a couple times they had machine rooms that were the size of people's entire living rooms with floating floors and floating ceilings with thousands and thousands of patch points for every room in the building, digital, analog, video, everything. And I remember there in one day, somebody was asking, route something from the sound stage down to, video 2, and then I need a backup audio recorded in studio C, and then we're routing it to mastering out of there to whatever. I was like, cool, gotcha. And I had everything patched in 30 minutes. I remember being like, whoa. It's like the saying in New York, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. Same thing at a facility like that. If you can handle a facility like that and route everything and know what's going on and have a good head about your shoulders, I I remember that was like a realization moment for me. Like I really knew what I was doing at that point. And as far as like just having the opportunity to have such raw talent come through the building, like one day it's like Harry Connick Jr. coming in and you're working with him on a jazz record, and then you're with Jay-Z the next day, and then you know, I mean, like a regular day for me was like, oh, now I'm going to be cutting vocals for Beyonce, Kelly, and Michelle for a record coming up. And I'm like, cool, that's a Tuesday for me. And that's just wild. A really good friend of mine, Rob Kanelski. We were both assistants around the same time at Sony. That's where we met. I think he was one of those general assistants that I had to win over at the time. But then he was promoted quickly to assistant around the same time I got there. And we became really good friends. I think he mentioned Jim Caruana. He was working there at well. Rich Keller worked. I actually assisted for him a bunch when I was first starting out at Sony, when he was doing all that DMX stuff, and like, you know, so that was a really interesting experience for a kid from the Midwest to get thrown into that right away. It took a while for me to be appreciative or appreciate the stuff that I was working on, for two reasons. The first reason, I was just so busy and on to the next that I wasn't really paying attention to the impact of the stuff that I was putting out or working on. I was on to the next, or so busy that I'm like, cool, what are we doing next? What are we doing next? Cool, I don't care that's going on over there. Second of all, the other reason is I just worked on it for a really, really long time. I didn't really want to hear it anymore. You know, I kind of got burned on it for a minute. So I think it took, you know, a couple, 3, 4, 5 years after like kind of some of the bigger records started coming out, and I actually go back and listen to them, or people will reference them, or I'd come back and actually have maybe a nostalgia moment finally and listen to them, and I'd be like, damn, okay, it's better than I thought it was. Or it's like, oh man, I can't even remember how I did that, but I know I did it. Or like, oh, I remember doing that. That was, wow, okay. All right, I'd pat me on the back. And it took a while for me to have that realization, partly because I'm always looking to what's next. You know, I'm not trying to look back as much as more like, where do I want to go next? So my focus is more forward usually, just part of my personality. And so I try not to like live in those nostalgia moments too much, but it's important to be aware of, I think, too, at the same time. Like, hey, like this was kind of cool and it worked really well, and maybe we could do that again, or something, you know, or take something from that experience. It was kind of more of a period than a project, because everything kind of all happened at once within like a year. Like thinking back now, I was young. I think I was like 23, 24. I had moved to New York when I was 20 or 21. And I worked for Sony as an assistant. And then I started engineering more, picking up freelance here and there. Hey, they just need somebody to come in and track vocals tonight, and little gigs here and there. And then it started becoming more and more apparent. It wasn't like I made it delineating, hey, I'm not going to work here and this is where I'm going to shift. It just became a gradual, well, this is all I'm doing anymore. I'm not really an assistant anymore. I'm just always booked engineering and or mixing. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I'm not an assistant anymore. Like I never had like a plant my flagpole in the sand declarative moment. I was like, all right, well, this is just kind of how it is. But I was like around 23, 24. I had started working with Common on tracking his B album and figuring out who was going to produce it and do that stuff. And he linked up with Kanye on that. And through working with Common, met Kanye. And this was when Kanye was working on his first album. So we got along and I started working on his records. So that started blowing up. And even before his album, or right around the time Kanye's first album came out, where I ended up being pretty heavily involved in the engineering of that. Like I said, I was working with Destiny's Child on their last album, just cutting some vocals and getting the last bit of the record together for them on the stuff. And I remember like I'd cut their vocals one night, and as you always do, you do rough bounces at the end of the night of each song so people can hear where it's at. And fast forward 6 months later, I get a call, or 4 months later, I get a call like, hey, how do you want your name to be credited as a mixer on this Destiny's Child album? I was like, what are you talking about? I didn't mix any of the songs on there. Like, well, actually, we had a mix, but this song, we really like your board mix from that night, and that's the one we're gonna put out. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. Like, so I'm like, hey, my rough mixes are now getting used for mixes. I started getting booked more as a mix engineer at that point, and then continued tracking for Kanye after College Dropout was released. Then we started shifting right into tracking Late Registration and continued mixing for Common, and then started branching more and more and more to projects. And within like a year frame, all these things started happening at the same time. And it was kind of like, okay, this is gonna work. Like, I can ride this for a while. No, it was not a normal progression. It did give me pause at the time, because I was like, what if I have a classic music industry thing? Like, what if I have a good year or two and then the phone stops ringing? So I just kept myself busy. But I mean, the interesting experience for me was, I remember I was 23, 24, somewhere in there. My friend Tom called me and he's like, congratulations on your Grammy nomination. And I'm like, yeah, cool, whatever. And like hung up, didn't think much of it, because I thought like one of the albums I worked on got nominated for a Grammy. But that was at the point, I think the next day I looked at the internet, and sure enough, there was my name as like a named nominee for Album of the Year for the College Dropout. And I was like, whoa, okay, this is different. All right, like, okay, cool. I had, I was, green, let's say, like, I'm like young and just trying to make good records. And so it was like trying to just roll with the punches of like having that kind of come in pretty quick. And it was interesting a few times after that, because I was pretty young. I would have some sessions where I'd show up and I hadn't met the artist before, and they'd book me to mix. We walk into the studio and they thought I was like the runner or something. And I remember like, you got to be cool with it, because you can't have an ego about it, especially because I feel like I had so many cool opportunities. I can't, I got to be thankful for each one of them. And I remember the artist being like, hey, can you pick up my dry cleaning and this thing, and here's the ticket, and we're ready to order dinner. And I was like, that's cool, I'll go do that stuff, but I'm actually here to like mix this record for you guys, so I can mix it, or I could go get your dry cleaning. And they're like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and I'm like, no, it's all good. But I get that, especially because when I was like 23, 24 years old, I looked like I was in high school. I had like, the young Midwestern kid face. So it was a weird experience, and I think I rolled with it pretty well. So I was in New York for probably like 5 or 6 years, and I could start to see more studios closing in New York, stuff's getting more and more expensive, less records were getting made. I actually was in demand enough at that point that I was flying out as an engineer to LA. I mean, and he's a great dude to work with, very particular about recording his vocals. I remember Common was out shooting something in LA, but he really wanted me to track his vocals, so we had to do a third verse on a song, and I literally flew out to LA just for the afternoon to cut a third verse, and then flew back to New York. And I started doing that more and more, and I'm like, my work seems to be shifting more out here. I see studios starting to close, so I kind of like sold my stuff, shipped my gear, which is the important stuff, shipped that to LA, got a place out there, and started working in LA. And at first, I started working out of more of the big commercial studios, and then I ended up getting my own place just to have like a home base to work out of, and place that I was comfortable at, and then go to a larger facility when I needed that. Yeah, Kanye's graduation. I remember randomly mixing this Vibes Cartel album when I first got out there. That was one of the first projects I did out there. And I definitely hit the ground running. I wasn't like, oh, where do I get work? It was like, damn, I'm busy still. And I think I was a little bit on the early side of the people moving out of New York, because I know Rob moved slightly there after me. And it actually worked out perfect, because he ended up, I got called to Hawaii to work on Kanye album and a Jay-Z album and some Kid Cudi stuff. And I ended up being in Hawaii for about a year unexpectedly. So I had my nice 2-bedroom apartment just sitting empty in LA. So I was like, it's around the time when Rob was ready to move out. I was like, just take my place because I'm not living there. And I'm not coming back anytime soon. So that was cool. And then it was a fun time. We ended up, that condo at high rise we ended up living in. Eventually Rob ended up moving across the hallway from me. Then Big Sean moved into the building. Then David Banner moved into the building. And then I think Travis was in there for a hot minute too. So it was kind of like a music industry hub, temporary land in LA kind of place too. So it was kind of a cool spot to be. So I worked in Hawaii on a bunch of different projects. Jay-Z Blueprint 3, Kanye's Dark Twisted Fantasy, some Cudi records were done out there. Some other records were done out there. It's a great facility out there called Avex Honolulu at the time. I think it's called Island Sound now. But it was this 112 input SSL, J, giant Augsburger surround room, all the outboard you can want for days. But nobody in Hawaii was making those records. So it's literally you just fly out and kind of post up and make albums. And it was a good experience making albums out there because you got a lot of the distractions put away from LA and New York, and it's kind of like a more you're there to work vibe, which I liked. I never kind of left LA. I was only supposed to be in Hawaii for a week or maybe 2 and ended up staying a little over a year just because just got busy, kept working out there. And I never really left LA, but after I got back to LA, I started working on a bunch of other albums, a bunch of other projects that I had lined up, and just kept all the work coming. And around that time, I ended up moving into a bigger facility in LA, had a big live tracking room, could put 20 people in there, no problem. Private key monitoring system, great sounding room. So it was really nice to have at my disposal my own private room where I could literally be like, it's just me chilling, mixing records, or I could have a full, like a string quartet and some other stuff come in too. It was a really, really awesome facility to have that. And to have at my disposal, especially since I am a producer and a mixer, it was really beneficial to have that. So I think one of the first records that I did where I was like the sole producer and mixer was a rapper named POS, who is on Doomtree. One of the other records I jumped into right away as a full-time producer and mixer was the Pet Shop Boys. I did their Elysium album. They flew out to LA and we posted up in my studio on Sunset, right in the middle of Hollywood, and they loved it. It was great because they're kind of a little bit royalty in the UK. And there we could just walk down to Sunset on in and out on Sunset and have a burger, and they kind of got to just relax and chill a little bit. But that was one of the first albums I jumped into as a full-time producer and mixer, was for the Pet Shop Boys. That's a common question, is like, how do you get the gig a lot of times? And everybody's process is a little different, but I feel like really the best way to get a gig, and usually is the way I get gigs, is word of mouth. Other artists talking to other artists you're on tour. Who did your record? Who did this for you? I really like that album. I want to find out. I want to look in the liner notes. That's the guy. I want to see who that is. So they were looking through the liner notes of the Fun album, the Tonight We Are Young, and saw that I was heavily involved in that album, that whole album. And we ended up talking and, going from there, and they really liked that album, and that kind of opened the door to the conversation with them. And it goes to that word of mouth thing. It's like, hey, he did this. I want to see who did that, and maybe we'll talk to them. So mostly my career has been word of mouth from other artists recommending me to other artists. And I feel like that's the most honorable kind of mention you can get, rather than, some manager trying to hustle a gig for you. It's like, no, that's the guy. You want him. And I feel really honored to, have that kind of recommendation. Besides the most obvious answer is like finding new music and creating new music is a big inspiring thing for me. Like, I like trying new things, doing new things sonically. That's a big inspiration. Outside of the studio, I find my reset in the mountains and nature and the beach. I have passions that, are along with technology and art as well that are parallel to my professional career. I like doing astrophotography. I like riding my motorcycle around the country, flying airplanes when I get the time, dabble in drones photography a little bit sometimes. I have a lot of interests and not enough time, unfortunately. So I like to stay sharp creatively by, keeping up on the latest plugins, methods. Listening to records is key. Hanging out with other songwriters and other producers, like, what do you think's hot? What is this new record? What's into it? Deconstructing mixes on my own that I listen to and try to recreate things or effects, or even have, exploration days where you're like, I'm going to try this new keyboard or this new plugin and just like figure it out. Like back when I was an assistant trying to learn an SSL that I had never touched before. Like, hey, there's this new thing coming out. I'm going to sit here 25 years into this and do the same shit that I did back when I was first starting. You can rest on your laurels, it's just not my style. I'm more interested in what's new than what I did 20 years ago. I'm more interested in what's happening next year than what I did 5 years ago, for sure. So a typical day for me, if I'm working here in the studio, it depends on a lot of things. If I'm mixing records, I tend to try to segment my mixes where I have technical time and then I have creative time. I like to delineate those two. So the first half of the day, I might be like opening sessions, make sure all my files are there. I do have assistants that can help with that, but I still like to give it the final check, make sure all my crossfades are there, any weird corrective EQs I need to do, organizational, busy work kind of stuff, that side of the brain work. And I might take a break, a couple hours, and then pick one song, maybe in the afternoon, evening, to creatively vibe out with. And it's not going to be one I worked on earlier in the day. It's going to be one that I did all that busy work 2 days ago. So I'm excited to jump into this. Oh, I want to get to this one. I'm not like, oh my God, I fixed that crossfade for 6 hours. So that moment has faded. Now I'm excited to work on it. So usually my day is kind of more the technical stuff in the morning, and then afternoon, evening, I'll dive into one creative and just, sometimes I get the vibe in 2 hours. Sometimes I'm there having fun all night long till I'm like, oh crap, it's dark outside. Where did the day go? So I try to segment my creative process and my technical process just to let my brain be in the right space and stay that way. Part of my day is this is a very, especially not so much as a mixer, but more so as a producer and a songwriter side of my day, is if I'm here as a producer or a songwriter side of my day, this took me a long time to learn, is most jobs traditionally you're like, I got to put in the hours, which is very much true. I got to put in the hours to get good at what you're doing, to, do your clock in the hours and to make you better at what you do. Or if you're working in a 9 to 5, you work your 9 to 5 to get paid. The interesting approach as a producer or a creative side is, once you're to a certain level or you've got your craft pretty down, clocking your hours isn't necessarily the best route. I've found, at least for me personally, like sitting there and grinding out, if I'm not in the right mindset to do creative decisions, mediocrity of plugging through it doesn't deliver a great record. 8 hours of mediocrity do not equate to 1 hour of excellence. So wait for your 1 hour of excellence. And sometimes it requires you to be patient, even when you know you should be doing something and you're not in the right mindset. Like I'm like, oh crap, I got to finish this song. And sometimes I've caught myself like, nope, I'm not going to work on this right now because I could just grind out here for 8 hours, frustrate myself, and it would be all for nothing. Or I could just go and chill and do something else or distract myself or do some more busy work, wait for that 1 hour inspiration and just nail it. So I have to be cognizant of that. And I've learned over time to be a little more forgiving of myself for not trying to clock a 9 to 5 every day. A good compromise for that a lot of times would be rather, okay, this creative process is not happening right here. The classic example that everybody does the meme is like, you're sitting here for snares for 6 hours looking for the one snare. I've heard 2,561 different snares for the same song. Pick a snare. Nobody cares at that point, The snare isn't your problem at that point. If you kind of find yourself doing it, the snare's not your problem. Your creative mindset's the problem right there. If you're previewing 2,000 snares, do something else. Come back to the snare. I guarantee the next one you're going to hit is going to work for you. That's how it works. So yeah, you got to distract yourself with other things. It's a very non-linear way of working a lot of times too that way, especially the way I mix records. Some people start to finish them. I like to step away from them for a day or two. Like I said, to delineate the technical side with the creative side. And more records nowadays, since we're not booking big studios and $3,000, $4,000 a day for an SSL room, you can have that luxury of taking time to sit with the record. And I actually like the fact a lot of times when artists don't get back to me right away, like the next day, like I want to sit with this for minus, like I need an immediate change where something's missing, but like, hey, I want to live with this record for a week. I actually really appreciate that. It allows us to come back fresh a week later. And any feedback that they may have, like, I really don't know about this chorus, maybe we should push this up. And then I hear it for the first time again almost too, rather than like, I've heard this 800 times today, this is what I think. So it allows me to be subjective about it too. The analog versus digital debate. Well, I came up with analog 2-inch SSLs, Neves, love all that stuff, it's cool, great technology. I am a humongous fan of digital. I love analog, front end, great, whatever, but the analog process to me, just like I was speaking about creative vibe and my mindset, is, yeah, if you have a dedicated run engineer, team, staff that's running all your analog stuff and keeping it in tip-top shape so there's no delay in what you want to record, fine, do analog. But I'd rather have a vocal take on an iPhone than a perfectly recorded Elam 251 vocal if the vibe absolutely crushes on the iPhone. And I don't think digital is inferior to analog. I think it's just an apples oranges thing. And I think digital offers you so many more creative opportunities and offers you so much more control that ultimately digital is where you want to be with analog influence. Put the analog in there, but then once you got it captured, that's great. I find that what a lot of people, when they reference analog, they're talking about, like, I call them happy accidents that analog causes, like hiss and warble and stuff sounding a little different, because digital is so precise. It doesn't make those errors. So people like analog, they like the errors. So when you're digitally processed, just make sure you have those errors in the record. Like I was talking about in some of my mixes, like the snares are out of time, the verbs get cut off. Those are those errors I'm introducing into the mix. I'm, pitching down a kick and it sounds fluffy and weird. And those are those errors that might be in the analog world we're introducing into the digital. I mean, the power and the creativity that you can make an amazing album on your laptop. Why should there be barriers to your creativity? So I love digital. I love analog too, but digital's where it's at. I'm a Pro Tools guy. Logic's awesome, have that. Ableton's cool. I play with Fruity Loops. I have no harm, no foul to any DAW. It's just use what works. I'm just so fast in Pro Tools. I've used it for so long. I produce in Pro Tools. I do all my MIDI in Pro Tools. I've just gotten so fast at it, it's like I don't even have to think about it. And it's apples and oranges, whatever you like. I kind of wear a lot of different hats. I produce, I mix, do songwriting sometimes, do tracking of instruments. And those kind of all, for me, are kind of all one and the same. I don't really delineate mixing from producing, from songwriting, from whatever. The way I approach music is kind of like has all those hats on at the same time. Now, when somebody hires me, they limit me to like, hey, this is what I want out of you, but I can't stop part of my brain from thinking about it as a songwriter or as a producer when I'm mixing, because that's just kind of inherent in how I approach music. So I'm kind of approaching it at all ways, holistically at all times. And I think that the more you can think that way as a mixer, as a producer, as an artist, the more aware of all the different aspects you are at one time is only an advantage. I don't think it's going to cause confusion. I think it's, as long as you don't let it limit what you're going to do, but being aware as a songwriter how to create a hook, can only translate in your producing, can only translate in your mixing. I don't think it's hard to delineate between the separate things, because I just view it as music and I want the complete package to shine through. And I like being unafraid to do what's needed. Like, I'm like, oh, I'm not gonna do that to the song because that's what a songwriter would do. That's what a producer would do. I was like, no, that's what it needs. Like I kind of don't, I try not to approach for it too specifically and just kind of think of it as like, here's the song, here's the artist, here's the vision. This is what we're going to make. Favorite part of the job is that every day is different. There are similarities, but it's like I have a different collaborator, different personality. It's one of those jobs that it's even weird saying it's a job, because it's a passion too. There's the technical aspect I love, like being aware of, converters and impedance and sample rates and EQs and Nyquist frequencies and all that technical stuff, right? And floating bits versus fixed bits, and we can dive into that with the best of them. But then there's the creative. Does that sound cool? Is that the right key? Does that vibe hard? It hits like all parts of those brains. And then there's also the interpersonal psychology element of it, in a sense, where you get to interact with a lot of really talented, bright, creative, technically adept people that are working at the highest levels. Like, getting introduced to that many people and that much of a cross section, just psychologically is a huge boon for my like intellectual stimulation to keep this exciting and fun too. Because if it was the same boring record every week, I'd be like, oh, okay, whatever. I know Bill wants this snare the certain way, and like that's one week, but then the next week it's like something completely different, and I'm like, okay, now I got to learn. I almost have to go relearn my approach with every artist and every mix, which keeps me on my toes and is part of like the fun process for me. The hardest part of the job would probably be the stuff I don't want to do, which usually ends up being like facilitating stems or organizational stuff. I'm more like excited. I want to get on the next thing. And yeah, I do have help to help me out with that, but still I'm the one responsible for it and making sure it's right and all that stuff. There aren't a lot of downsides to it, actually, honestly, and I really have no complaints. But I think it's more the file management is like probably not the funnest thing in the world, but it's not that bad. I really have no complaints. It's interesting because I thought I would be more excited about it, and like it kind of goes to my mindset of what's next rather than like, that's cool. I remember it was probably at a club or a party or something like that. I've definitely heard them in elevators even. But I've heard them in some spots you're like, okay, and usually it's when the song's hot, which means I just did it, so I really don't want to hear it then, like I'm like, oh God. You guys are hearing this song this week or this last 2 weeks. I've been hearing this for the last 6 months. So I'm usually in break mode when it's popular. So I usually kind of a little bit more indifferent to it. The thing that's a little more humbling and interesting for me is if I go to like a stadium show and an artist is performing a song I wrote or mixed or something like that or produced, and you see like 50,000 people like singing along to the shit that you helped create along with the artist, and I'm like this little speck in the stadium there, and I'm like, it's a kind of a surreal moment. Like, just, it's really nice because you're like, wow, what I do in this little room or these little studios or whatever really kind of like impact a lot of people's lives. I'm gonna get a little deep on you for a minute because this is kind of spurring something in for me. Is like, or I feel that like music for a lot of people is like a mental health release, and it's a mental health validation for a lot of people. Like, other people are going through, you can hear people tell stories in song form about the same shit you may be going through, or something that you've experienced it, and don't feel alone. We're a lot of people who don't have access to therapy or friends or validation that can help them figure that out. So when I see that and and just realize the impact that can make, and even doesn't even have to be a bad thing. It'd be a good thing. Like, hey, this is like helping people feel good about themselves or good about an experience in their lives. It's kind of humbling and awesome and super motivating. And that's been a personal goal of mine, because I usually am a studio rat and I'm held up here and busy making records, and they don't let me out much, that kind of vibe. So I'm making an effort to go to more shows and see stuff, what's going on, and be part of that a little bit more, to get to experience a little bit of the fruits of the labor and see the impact that it makes, and allow me to adjust what I do to respond to that as well. The long answer to that is it's always kind of humbling and a soak-in moment when you hear one of your songs in a big setting. I think this is going to be probably a popular answer or a common answer, but it rings true, is why do people connect with certain artists and certain songs? First on the list is authenticity. Because of the psychological element of why we listen to music, it's the authenticity of the storyteller draws you in. Living that life, knowing what they're telling you about in this song is real, or they lived it, or they're portraying in a way that's accurate, makes you relate to it 100 times more as a listener. I think people gravitate wholeheartedly to authenticity more than anything else. Be you. Don't try to be a copy of somebody else, because you will always be a step below the person you were trying to copy, because that's their authentic selves. So be your authentic self and let it rock. That's my advice to most artists. Just, we like you for you. With that authenticity of artists, there was actually a time, my studio in LA, I started working with younger, newer artists because I really liked what they were doing. And I had my Grammys up on the back and the platinum plaques on the wall, and because that's what you put up in your studio, hey, I did this. And I started noticing more and more with 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old artists, they would come in and they'd be like, oh, wow, you did this, you did this. And they would I could sense they would start to second guessing why they were in that room. They somehow didn't belong, or was intimidating or scary in some aspect. So I took them down. I removed them all out of my studio. I took them down. Because I'm I want to tell them no, you're here because you're important, because I want to hear you be you. Don't let this means fucking nothing. You're the next up. I'm having you in here because you're exciting and I like what you're doing. So I removed a lot of that stuff because I just didn't want it to be in people's minds to mess up. They're oh man, should I do this or should I? It's no, just do what you think you should do. Don't change yourself because you see a plaque on the wall. So that was kind of something I noticed, and I made sure to correct that. I love working with mega huge artists. Super fun. Love it. Super cool. Amazing to have carte blanche to do what you want. I really love working with unknown artists. I'm you got 10,000 listeners on your Spotify? Let's go. If you're doing something cool. And part of that, I actually kind of am more excited about working with somebody new and being on the ground floor, because I've been on the ground floor with a lot of artists that have, I remember such and such when he was rapping to me in the hallway, and now he's winning Grammys and shit. So I like being part of that fundamental creation of the squad and the sound, and because you can not be restricted by people's perceptions well, he made that record and that's his sound or that's her sound. You can't deviate from that formula too much. And there is an element to that in the music industry. You can't suddenly be a rap artist and now you're going to be a screamo lead singer of a metal band. People what the hell are you doing? That's a very hard transition. Whereas if you're a new artist, kind of the sky's the limit, and you can have fun, and you get to be that pure creative authenticity, like I was talking about. You can, on the ground floor, you can just like bring out what they have and make them sound the best they can. So I like working with both, but it's really fun to be in with the new artists. What I would look for in an assistant would somebody that would anticipate what I want, what I'm going to do, takes time to learn my process, observant. It could be like, I've had assistants, Mike, he's an awesome dude, be busy tracking something on a keyboard thing and working out a theme of a song. And then I turn around and he hands me my guitar. He knew I was going to cut. It's already tuned up and plugged in, hands it to me. He like, I didn't even ask for it. Like, here it is. It's like, thank you, man. Like, that was it. Something as small as that. Like, can you find my guitar and tune it up? Nope. Here it is. Here you go. Reading the room, knowing when to speak up, knowing when to shut up. The thing about being an assistant too is being quiet is sometimes more powerful than being outspoken. Just because you have a great idea doesn't mean that everybody needs to hear your great idea at that point. I think if you can come in clutch at the right time and save the day on something, that's way better. You know, like, let people approach you rather than you approaching people. So be that rock, be that, like, hold that thing down. And this will tie into maybe a question we have later is like, what advice do you give people to do in the music industry? My advice to people who want to work in the music industry, be a producer or mixer, is be around people who are doing what you want to be doing. If you want to be a mix engineer mixing classical, go find the people who are making those records. If you want to produce R&B records, get in with the crews that are making R&B albums. Because I've benefited from people I've been assisting going like, well, I can't do it. What about Andrew? You can do this, right? Yeah, I can do it. And I've passed gigs to my assistants being like, hey, I really like this artist. I don't have time to do it. Or for whatever reason, it's not a right fit for me. Hey, you can handle this, right? Yeah, absolutely. So being around people who are doing what you want to be doing is, you're going to be in the room, you're going to learn from them tenfold. So figure out what you want to do and just find the people who are doing it. It's awesome. Let me be straight. It is, I mean, you asked the 20-year-old me, would I still have a career at this? You know, in my early 40s, I'd be like, no. You know, like, maybe, I don't know, I hope so. But it just seems so far out and such a distant goal, you know? I love that having my passion as my work, it doesn't feel like work to me. I am really happy and really blessed, like, that I get to do what I love to do, and it's a super fun passion for me. The only time that it feels like a little annoying is like where there's a project or a kind of music you're a super fan of, or like, I was like, I really like this band, I really want to do this album, but professionally, business-wise, it doesn't always make sense. And so that's more the fan in me, like, has to be like, dope, I really want to do that. But like the business brain has to be like, yeah, but you can't do that, you know? So that's the only downside is, but then at the same time for me, it's fun too, because then I get to be back in fan mode and excited about it again. And it's not like, oh, this is an album I could potentially work on. No, this is just a band or an artist I really like, and I'm just gonna fanboy out on them, you know? So that's an advantage to it too. But juggling that can be a little bit interesting at times, but for the most part, I couldn't imagine doing anything else at this point. I think I've made some pretty good, solid choices so far. And, you know, there's been mistakes and missteps and things I would have done differently, but it's one of those things is like butterfly effect. If I changed one of those things, I might not be where I am today. So maybe I needed to make those mistakes when I made the mistakes. And I would say my advice would be just keep going. Keep doing it. Your setbacks are okay. Again, there too, there's been, you know, missteps here and there, but for the most part, I'm confident in like the business choices and decisions. I feel like I made pretty good business choices. I didn't run out and get management right away or legal representation. My advice more to people would and I see this more and more, would be like people like, I'm going to get a manager, I'm going to make it now, or I'm going to get a lawyer, I'm going to make it. I'm like, no, you're not. Your manager doesn't really give you business. He helps facilitate your business, and maybe they can bring some things, but that's not a manager. A manager is there to facilitate the work that you can't facilitate because you're so busy. Same thing with legal. It becomes kind of self-evident when you need help. And when you're overwhelmed and over-exasperated, get help. But don't think that just because you're hiring somebody on, it's going to blast you to the next level. I think it's kind of let the paths lead themselves. And I kind of did that with my business side of it. You know, there's things I probably would have handled differently, but again, butterfly effect. It all led me to where I am right now. And I'm happy with that. I decided to do Puremix partly because I feel like I have something to add to the music community, the mixing community. I kind of approach things differently than other people, and similar to others too. And I grew up in an era where there were big studios and big facilities, and came up in an era where you could kind of collaborate more together. And more now, especially post-COVID, music creation seems a little more segregated or compartmentalized. And avenues like Puremix allow people to get resources and outside information that you otherwise wouldn't be able to get. It's a really great asset. And, you know, I've dabbled in the past in some forum stuff, and that's kind of a more limited crowd. And there's the dedicated diehards on there too. But there's something different that comes up about internet posts than in-person interviews, where you can get a sense of the reasoning and the thoughts and the emotions behind their decisions. I think it's a pretty good asset to have as a mixer, producer, learning your craft. And even me as an established mixer and producer, I still love like watching what other people do and their breakdowns and their process, because I'm still learning too. And I forget, there's a great quote, is like, you die when you stop learning. And if I'm done learning, I probably shouldn't be doing this job anymore. So it benefits me just as it benefits everybody else. I actually have been noticing more harmonic and melodic content coming back to a lot of modern production, and I'm really happy about that, because classically trained, like that's like, I'm aware of harmony and melody and song structure and bridge formats. I see more of a trend towards people creating with instrumentation again, and getting off of all straight laptop music. Not to say there's anything wrong with that, but I think that the newer music coming out right now with people are like, and there's been a slow transition of bridging the lines between rap and singing and country and pop, and it's all kind of becoming this homogenous thing that people are pulling musical influences from everywhere. And it's the music part is appreciated more now than it has been maybe the last decade or so. And I'm excited about that, because I'm like, yes, I'm back. Harmony's back, melody's back, let's go. Because I love that stuff, you know, like that's like, I mean, I'm a music theory nerd. I have all that training. So I'm like, cool, I get to like talk about like, we're gonna put a ninth on here because it builds tension to the third, and like, they're like, yes, I don't know what you're talking about, but that sounds cool. And they're all game for it. So I'm excited about that. There's the music making now seems to be more that, and I've actually had references like pull back to like Lisa Loeb or singer-songwriter stuff from like the 90s or 80s, and I'm like, that's all awesome. I love that. And I think enough time has passed for that stuff to be cool again. So I'm excited for that. As far as like the technology next level with AI and stuff like that, I'm not that concerned about it, because I think there's going to be AI music. And actually some of the meme songs I was talking about earlier are cute and funny, and AI makes great meme music. And does AI have a place in the creative process? Probably. I'm not going to say it doesn't. And I can see AI giving you some great song starter ideas, some loop ideas, some stuff like that. The problem with AI is it's not authentic. And humans need that authenticity for the therapeutic part of music that we connect with. and we're not connecting with memes. We're connecting with memes for laughs, but not the emotional well-being of a human being. That's not why you're listening to music. That's not why you're listening to a song. AI has a place, but it's not going to be, if AI starts creating more and more music, I actually think you'll see a shift of authentic creators making stuff that's opposite of that. And that's what people are going to seek out. So AI has a place in our world, and it's going to change stuff, but I'm not really that concerned about it because I think we as humans still know when it's AI, even as good as it gets, and we seek out that authenticity. So I think it's interesting to see what'll come. I'm curious just like everybody else and learn to adapt with it for sure.